Ipen pension system is designed to assist in the management of individual and scheme pension plans. The featured modules include marketing, quotation management, fund administration, pensioners management, investments management, finance, and accounting and reporting. I will be walking you through how to interact with this system. Let us begin by logging into the system. Upon logging into the system, one will be greeted by the home page, with the system modules on the left, the dashboard on the center, and user details and the log off option on the top left of the screen. The dashboard contains visual information that can give insight on aspects like fund value per scheme, membership growth, production per business lines, and any other dimensions from different modules. Let us proceed to the Employees tab. The Employee tab will have information on employees registered into the system. Information like their username, their staff number, the employee group they fall under, their activity status, and if they have to change their passwords when they first log in will be displayed here. Administrators and relevant parties can add new employees to the system by clicking on the New button at the top left corner of the screen. There, they can enter the employee's username, staff number, employee group, and select whether they can change their passwords when they first log in and their activity status. We can add the phone numbers of the employees in question, and we can link existing employee roles to the employees on the Employee Roles tab. Anytime we create or edit a given role, they will be linked at this level. This means that any time we create a role and define its permissions, we can then decide which employees in the system can be linked to that specific role. Of course, one should finish up by clicking on the Save button after all necessary information is entered. Since we touched on linking employee roles under the Employee tab, let us have a look at the Employee Role tab under the System Admin module. The Employee Roles tab is used to define what specific employees can and cannot do. Upon clicking on the tab, one will be greeted by a list of existing employee roles with brief information on the name of the role, if their role is administrative or not, and if the users assigned this role can edit modules. To create a new role, click on the New button at the top left corner of the screen. The first step will simply be specifying the role name. When defining a role can be administrative or not. If a role is administrative, the user granted that role will be able to access the System Administration module, which basically means that the user can be able to create new users, roles, and do other ICT administrative functions. If a role is not administrative, then said user cannot access the System Module Administrator. If a role can edit a model, the user granted that role probably has got advanced development knowledge and can be able to extend the system in areas where tools to do just that have been provided. One of these areas could be reporting, meaning this user can create and design a new report or even edit existing ones. Same for analytics and dashboards, where the user can create or make changes to existing dashboards or analytics. Let's move on to the permission policy. Permission policy determines the mode of access by default. There are three options under the permission policy drop-down. A role can be denied all permissions by default, read only by all default, and allow all by default. When a role is denied all permissions by default, this specific role will be denied all permissions, whether navigation or type permissions, by default. Meaning the role will have to be explicitly assigned permissions. If that role is not assigned permission, then the user assigned this role will not even be able to access the system modules. When a role is read only by all default, users assigned this role will be able to access all the modules in the system except the administration module, but on read-only mode where you can only view but not edit, write or delete. Usually, this role is given to management and board members. When the permission policy is allow all by default, users assigned this role will have all permissions granted unless they are denied permissions under the tab for denied actions. By default, this user has all permissions, but we can then revoke some roles for a given module. The modules not revoked will be accessible to them on read and write. The Type Permissions tab defines the functionality of access objects. Basically, the functionality you can carry out on an object. For the various functions we can carry out on the system, one can be able to just view, which means read, write, which provides editing functions, create, which means one can add, delete, which means you can remove, and the navigate function, which means one can be able to move across and view. This function can essentially allow one to have a list view of that object. An object in this system could be a receipt invoice. In this instance, the target type is a receipt invoice. So, a user can be able to read a receipt invoice, add a receipt invoice, create a receipt invoice, write a receipt invoice. But this role can't delete, so we'll select that accordingly. But they can navigate. This means when this user goes to the screen of received invoices, they can be able to have all those functionalities listed except for deleting invoices. Even after this user creates an invoice, they cannot be able to delete it. This takes us back to the denied all permissions by default selection under Permission Policy, where the actions allowed to such users will be defined under the Type Permissions tab. Let us address the Navigation Permissions tab. Navigation permissions are basically what a user can and can't see. Depending on the role and its permissions, a role can be able or unable to see particular modules on the system or have full or restricted access and interaction capacity with said modules. Denied actions come into play when the permission policy is allow all by default, as I mentioned earlier. Let's move on to the Employee Groups tab. Employee groups are primarily created for the purpose of tracking communication and making communication efforts convenient. In this system, information is relayed to specific employee groups from management. For example, communication through email and SMSs with specific information can be targeted to a group of employees who are under administrators, or just claims administrators, others who are board members, and so on and so forth. Basically, employees under that specified group will be the ones to receive information communicated to the group. To create a new employee group, simply click on the Create button on the top left of the screen and fill in information on the group name, the group type, the group email, and the appropriate phone number, then save. As discussed earlier, these groups can be assigned to employees on the Employee tab. Let's move on to the Audit Trail tab. This can be viewed by system admins. This is basically an ICT function that lets one look at what was changed, when it was changed, which user changed it, the previous and current values. This can be extracted by ICT for audit purposes. For the Mail tab, this is a tool a user uses for communication management. One can look at all the system-generated emails, and whether or not they were sent successfully. The SMS Audit tab does the same only for SMSs this time.
For more inquiries, use the contact information shown to reach us.